Hi and welcome to my latest video. In this video what happened was my son said he'd like me to make him a machine for printing t-shirts. So I knew nothing about printing t-shirts, so of course I went on YouTube, found a couple of videos. Turns out it's called screen printing. This is an example of a screen. You basically put your design onto a piece of, it used to be silk but now it's polyester. But basically, you put your design onto a screen, you put your screen down, you put ink on here, and then you scrape the ink backwards and forwards, and it transfers the design onto the t-shirt. That's apparently how it works. So I'm like, sure, this is going to be no problem, dead easy. All I need to do is make a board. This one's actually too small, but I need to make a board which is the same size as the screen. So then I can just, put the t-shirt on here. I can put this on here, put some ink, and Bob's your uncle. Just need to cut a board the right size. Turns out it's a bit more complicated than that, because actually you want to print multiple t-shirts, and this thing's like covered in ink, which is very, very messy. So you don't want to have to take this away and bring it back and then juggle the ink that's inside of it, stuff like that. What you really need is for this to be able to hinge up, down like this. So turns out you can actually buy special hinges which are designed for screen printing specifically, and they have a kind of a, there's also a part here that screws to the board, and there's a part here which will hinge into your screen, and you can put them at the back of the screen like this, one here, and then you can hinge your screen up and down. So that's a simple solution to that problem. The next problem is you need a way to actually hold the screen here without holding it with your hand at 45 degrees whilst you put the next t-shirt in. So I also need a mechanism for holding this up, which is a little more challenging. The other problem is that, of course, there's no way to actually get your t-shirt onto this board. If I put a t-shirt here, here's an example of a t-shirt. If I wanted to print onto this t-shirt, I'd want to get this front surface of the t-shirt on the board, but of course I also have this back surface to the t-shirt. So in order for this to work, I would actually need the board to be like suspended in air. Like I'd have to have it like floating away from the desk, so that I can put the t-shirt like this, like over the top of the board. So so I need a board that's going to be suspended like this in air, so that I can put a t-shirt over it with hinges and a mechanism to hold the frame up to 45 degrees. So I came up with a design. It turns out a little more complicated than I first thought. My design is right here. Okay, so the design involves having a board and having some things at 45 degrees that you can hold the board up. I'm going to use magnets to hold the board in the 45 degree position. The other complication with this is that he doesn't just want to print t-shirts, he wants to print other things. So this board here needs to be of various different sizes. So you can see I made a couple of dovetails in here, and I'm going to use these little things. Okay, so these little devices, which have dovetails, kind of this little bar is like a dovetail shape, and there's a screw which you can tighten down. So you can slide this into a piece of wood, and then you can tighten this screw at the bottom to fasten it down. So I'm going to use some of these to fasten this board here to some rails, so that this can slide backwards and forwards. I'm also going to use the same thing to allow these to slide from side to side, so that you can use different sized frames. Well, that's the plan. I have a few more detailed drawings. I think we're going to start with like the main chassis. So this is a drawing of the main sort of support system. There's a couple of rails here and here. These rails are going to be like attached down to a bench using some fence clamps. You might see I've made drawn some little holes here, so you can slide the fence clamps in and then clamp them over the desk. So this part will be clamped down, which allows this part to sort of overhang the table and have some weight put on it, and the weight will be supported by these two things being clamped to the desk. It also has these bars running across here and here. These will have sort of sliding carriages on them which hold the hinges that are going to hold the frame. And these little dovetail pieces here are these little guys. These are going to slide into the carriage and allow you to sort of position it and then tighten it down to a certain position. So that's the piece that I'm going to make first. So I'm going to try and make this screen printing machine out of wood that I have left over. This is my pile of stuff that's left from previous projects. I have various sheets here, some hardwood. I don't think that hardwood's long enough to make the rails. Maybe it is. I'll measure it in a bit later. I've also got some softwood here, which might be useful for something. I also have some MDF. I have some like 1/2-inch ply down there, which I think will probably come in useful. So yeah, I'm going to sort through this and I'll try and find some old scraps of wood and see if any of it will work for me. So I decided MDF is probably going to work for the board, the place where you put the t-shirt down to do the printing. We're going to need 3 sizes of those. This is going to be the smallest. This is going to be 12 by 22 inches. I'm also going to need a slightly bigger 18-inch by 22 board, which is more of a t-shirt size. And then also my son would like to have like a 30 by 40, which is going to be maybe a little challenging, but we'll come to that later. For now, I've got this piece of MDF. It's a little bit more than 12 inches wide. I'm going to cut it down to 12 inches. I already set up my table saw, and I changed the blade of my table saw to an old one because I don't like to cut MDF on my good saw blade. I like to just use some old saw blade for this. So, okay, let's get some cutting done. That's my 12 by 22 inches out of MDF. It's 3/4 inch thick. And I found this nice piece of Paduk, which I think if I split it in half down the middle, I think that can be used to make the 2 rails. I'd really like to make the rails out of hardwood because this is the part that's actually going to take the weight when you're pushing down on the t-shirt. It's hanging over the edge of the table. So yeah, don't really want to do MDF for that for sure. Plywood maybe. This hardwood is going to be perfect for that job. So I'm just taking a look at this piece of hardwood, and it seems like this surface is pretty flat. I've got it on my jointer just because this is a really good long flat surface. Seems like it touches all the way along on this side. This side it doesn't, it's slightly bent, not much. That side is slightly concave. This side of course is just where it was roughly cut as lumber. So I have one flat side. Yeah, which is that one. So that's going to be my face on the bottom there. I need to get the plane out, plane the top surface so that it's flat. I need to get my circular saw and cut it down the middle. And I need to obviously plane off this surface here, and I should have 2 pretty decent pieces of wood for the rails. So I'm about an hour into the build now, and I've got a couple of rails made out of Paduk, which are going to be good and strong. I've got a bit of MDF to put the t-shirts on. That's 12 by 22 inches. And then over here I've cut some more pieces of MDF which I'm just gluing together to make them slightly thicker, because I don't want to use them for these parts here, which are the bits that clamp to the table and that support the rails. So once I've got these bits glued, I need to cut these dovetails into it. I'd also need to run the dovetailing bit down the rails so that the rails will slide into these pieces, and then I'll be able to anchor the rails down to the table. So good progress so far. So I'm now over at the router table. I'm going to cut some dovetails into the bottoms of these rails, and I think I'll make them about 6mm deep. So right now it's just 4. I've just got to increase the depth of my router blade here, and we get to 6mm. Tiny bit over. Okay, that's close enough. .6mm. So my router bit is 19.2mm, so that should be a little bit tight to begin with, but we can always just run it through again and just take off a tiny bit. Yeah, fits quite nicely, as it should really. So now that I have a couple of rails and they're dovetailed into these pieces here that will be clamped to the tabletop, I need to use these frame clamps to do the clamping. So what I need to do is make some holes in here to take the round part of this frame clamp so that it can go in like this and then clamp it to the table. This frame clamp here, which allows me to clamp it to the surface. The frame clamps, just go in the holes like this. They're a little bit tight, but they go in fairly easily. This front foot still can slide backwards and forwards in the dovetails like this, if you want to position that somewhere differently. It also has holes here and here for the same frame clamps. Next thing, I'm going to put these cross pieces in, and I'm going to fasten them in with these 2-inch screws. So next I need to take these little toggle clamp things and attach them to this piece of wood. I think I need them about 50 from the edge. I think that'll give enough room to rotate the knob from underneath without hitting your fingers against this rail. So I've set my square to 50mm. I'm just going to go put it in between these two lines and draw a line like that. Same thing on the other side, so the distance is the same. Making the distance the same will make it much easier to cut the dovetails into the board that goes on top, because I can just use the same measurement to position the dovetails. So I've marked where I want to make my holes. I'm just going to use a center punch just to make sure that I drill accurately. Get the center punch exactly on the cross. Just ensure that the drill bit hits the right spot. 1/2 inch right a bit into my router. This is the little toggle clamp thing that, you know, holds the tops down. I just need to make sure that this is a little bit deeper, so that there's room for this to actually pull down and tighten. So it doesn't need to be exactly the same, it needs to be just a little bit higher. So right now it's probably a little bit too high. I'm going to back it off and come back in the up direction. So yeah, there you go, that's like a couple of millimeters. I'll probably just route a little bit in some scrap wood first, and then try sliding this in just to make sure everything works before going ahead and doing it on the real piece of wood. It's still pretty loose, but with the deeper cut, it does mean that when you clamp it down like this, it ends up being kind of flush with the wood because it's now thinner here, but you end up with this kind of big gap. Maybe this is desirable. Maybe it's nice to have these able to move, you know, quite a bit inside the dovetail. Anyway, this is the recommended, this 3/8. You know, I might even do it a tiny bit deeper, because otherwise when this is tight it only just grips it actually. So this is my final test cut. It's a little bit higher than 3/8, which is more than it instructs you, but I think that'll make it a little bit tighter. So I'm going to give that a try and see how that works out. Okay, let's see what happens when we put this in. Okay, so yeah, it's still very loose, but now when I pull it down tight, there's still a bit of space at the bottom. I think I like that better, so yeah, I'm going to go with that setting, and now I'm going to route the actual table. Still, these are really loose, kind of surprising. Okay, let's see if this fits. I've cut these dovetails into the board now. I've got these little toggle clamps fitted here. Theoretically, this should slide onto these toggle clamps like this, and they should slide all the way down to this set like this, and then I can reach underneath and I can tighten those down like this, and now that's solidly in place. Okay. So I've got this chassis mostly built. I just have these two rails to do. So these two rails need to be cut into these hardwood rails that run along this way. I've decided to use a softwood for this. I've got this piece of softwood that I just have lying around. I put it through the plane a couple of times just to make sure it's the same thickness all over. Other than that, good to go. This is my piece of softwood. It needs to be cut into these two rails by cutting some pieces out here. So I'm going to just position this across here. I'm going to get a square, make sure that it's square across here. That's on my line. And I'm going to use this striking knife just to make sure that I get a good clean line here, because I want these to be pretty tight. Otherwise they're going to impact on the strength of these beams. So let's put it there. Okay, and then keeping that perfectly on that line. I'll put my softwood in place, and I'm going to just lightly mark the other side of it, then put my knife in the mark. Get this knife in the line right up to it. Just make that line a little heavier, a few more strokes, and also transfer that to the other side. Cool. I need to take my marking gauge I need to set it to the thickness of this wood. Yep, that's perfect. There's a way of doing this with a marking gauge. Just put it on a flat surface, put it down like this, but you can see it's going to the same place. Okay, so now I need to cut from these rails down to that thickness, so that between these two lines. I'll just mark that so we know where we're going. And then I'm going to get a tenon saw, I'm going to make some cuts here, and then I'm going to take a chisel and just clean out those. Okay. Okay, so now I need to fit these softwood pieces in here. I already set this to the depth like this. So it's the same on both sides. They're reasonably tight fit. That's a good tight fit. So we're looking pretty good. The chassis is now finished. We've got the 4 feet that clamp it to the table. We've got the hardwood rails that take most of the weight. We've got the little clamps that hold the board at the front there. And then we've got these side pieces. These are going to hold the sort of the carriages that slide backwards and forwards that contain the hinges. So I've got the basic chassis built and the board for doing the actual t-shirt printing. So the t-shirts go on here. This board can slide in and out. I've got two batons here, which can take some carriages which will slide sideways, and the design for those carriages is very clever. It's on this drawing. Hinge the frame up and down. So the only thing we need now is a mechanism to hold the frame at 45 degrees. So now I'm into the final challenge, which is creating these 45-degree supports for the printing screen. I drew them like this. I'm not so convinced now I want to make them exactly like this. I've got a slightly better idea. I'd like to make them sort of hinge down and hinge up and things like that. So I've drawn a kind of an idea for an arm, which kind of looks like this. The idea being that it has like a 45-degree piece here, and then it's rounded here. So if I stand this up against the thing, you can see that when it's at this angle, it can sit flat against the board, but then I can also rotate it around all the way around like this, and lie it flat against this back part of the machine. So that will mean that the machine is still completely flat, so that it's easy to store and carry. But these bits will stick up, and they won't stick beyond the end here with this length here. So I'm going to use this piece of paper as a template. I'm going to cut out some very thin plywood in this shape, and I'm going to sandwich sort of two pieces of plywood either side of a block, and put a nut and bolt through so that it will rotate. I'm going to try that and see how well that works out. Place this down here. You can see at this end it stops at 45 degrees, and at this end I can rotate it all the way around and make it flat. So that means I can position it like somewhere here, so this arm doesn't go beyond the end of the machine, and then I can hinge it up like that, and then place some magnets here, and then I can use the magnets to hold up the screen. Of course, these pencil lines are on the outside of the shape, so when I take this to the bandsaw, it will be important to remove the line with the bandsaw. Now, this will hinge up like this, and when that's held down, that should be pretty secure. Okay, now I just need to make 3 more of those. The t-shirt printing machine is finished, and now I'm going to walk you through some of the features. First of all, it has a back foot which is made of MDF, which has holes in it for fence clamps. You can see there's some holes at the sides and at the back. I currently have it clamped down to my workbench. Then this back foot has some hardwood rails which are dovetailed into it. There also dovetails and screws actually, so those are very securely attached to the bench. It also has a front foot here. This is also drilled with holes for these same kind of fence clamps, so you can clamp this to a bench as well, and it will slide backwards and forwards to accommodate different widths of tables. When it's right at the front, of course, this platform is very solid, but you can't slide a t-shirt over it. If you want to print t-shirts, you need to slide it to the back like this, and then you can take a t-shirt and you can put the t-shirt over the top like this in order to print onto it. So it has these 2 hinge carriages, and these will slide independently from left to right and can be locked into a certain position. And each hinge carriage has these 2 frame hinges, which you can use to clamp your silkscreen frame. You can do very, very narrow frames if you want by moving these 2 hinges quite close together. Once this becomes too wide, then of course you can switch to using one hinge from this carriage and say that hinge to get a wider one. In the extreme, if you move these right out to the extremes and take the 2 outermost hinges, then you can do a 30-inch wide screen print. So this platform where you put the product that you're going to print onto is also adjustable, so you can slide it backwards and forwards like this. And in fact, you can slide it out completely and replace it with a wider board or a deeper board, and you can print. This is the smallest one, 12 inches wide. The biggest one is 30 by 40 inches, which is pretty large. It has these arms that sit at 45 degrees. These arms have magnets in them here. There's actually a stack of 3 magnets pressed into the wood there. You can put another magnet at a corresponding spot on your silk screen frame, so when the frame hinges up, it clicks into here and it holds it at 45 degrees. This is the aspect of this design which I'm not entirely happy with. Almost everything else I think worked out really well, but the magnets don't hold it so well because if the thing's at a slight angle, the magnet won't really stick. It has to hit exactly exactly at the same angle as the magnet is for it to work. I think what I might do is try and investigate using a different kind of magnet, maybe a larger magnet, and perhaps putting it on a hinge so that the magnet can swing backwards and forwards so that it can align with the angle of the frame. I think that might work better. This kind of works. It doesn't work as well as I'd like. To make the machine more transportable and also to give a bit of flexibility on exactly where this bar is so that it can work with different kinds of frames, I made these rotate like this. So you can rotate them all the way around and put them at the back. They don't protrude beyond the back foot, so it doesn't make the machine any longer, but it does make the machine completely flat, which means if you're not using it and you want to store it, you can stand it up against a wall, and it makes it easy to kind of throw it in the trunk of a car or something like that, just the fact that the whole machine is now fairly flat. So when you want to do some printing, you could use a slightly bigger board for this frame, but it just shows that you place the frame on here, you bring those hinges across like this. As I say, there are 4 hinges, you can use whichever ones you want, and you can move these carriages about to suit how you want to lock it down. You can lock it down like that, and then the frame will hinge up like this. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I certainly had fun learning all about screen printing. If you're interested in making one of these machines, this one cost me about $70 to make. These hinges were $15 a pair. The little sort of dovetail clamp things were $20 a pack. I used 2 packs of those. So that's like 70 bucks. And then I bought a couple of nuts and bolts, which were just a few cents. So it cost me about $70 because I had all the wood already. If you don't already have the wood, then it may cost you a little bit more. If you want it to be less flexible and not go up to the 30 by 40 inch size, you could only need one of these carriages, and then you could have half as many hinges, and the whole thing would be a lot simpler, a lot cheaper. I think you could make one that was only for t-shirts for about 30 bucks. Anyway, I had fun making it. I hope you enjoyed watching it. See you next time.